what would the state need to do to make that happen in New Hampshire?
Yeah, so you would need a physical space. You'd also, again, need the funding to do so, but I think it's also a
the biggest F word on this podcast.
Yeah.
Welcome to New Hampshire Has Issues, the podcast that dares to ask, is homelessness a problem in New Hampshire? All right, you want to hit it? Erica or Lauren, who's going to take it?
I'm going to let Erica do it.
Yes, okay. Erica, let's hear it.
Welcome to New Hampshire Has Issues, where we dare to ask, how do we love our community better?
Ugh, it's just so good. See, I love this about guests because I go in and I'm like, I'm going to be a pain in the bum. And then the guest is like, I'm going to say this beautiful tagline that is the best thing ever. And I think it is a question that is applicable for every episode, but especially this one where, you know, maybe in a lot of folks' minds, folks who are unhoused, people feel like they're not part of the community for some reason, when in fact, they're as much our community members as anyone else who's here. So that's an excellent tagline and tragically accurate as well. So I am your host, Liz Canada, and joining me today are two people. I've never actually had two guests on the podcast yet. You are my initiation into multi-guest podcasting. Hope it goes okay.
We love to be the first at stuff.
Yes. The pioneers, first in the nation, first on the podcast, something like that. So my guests today are two folks from Families in Transition, Erica Diamond and Lauren Bombardier. Welcome to the show, Erica and Lauren. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Of course. I am so excited that you are here because quite a few episodes ago, I had Nick Taylor on to talk about housing, affordable housing, housing affordability, and we just barely touched on the topic of homelessness and unhoused folks. And a few listeners reached out to me and they're like, you need to get Erica Diamond and Lauren Bombardier on this show now. Here you are. Thank you for being the experts to come talk to me because I've learned a lot in my time on this earth, but I'm always learning more. And I'm hoping you can help me better understand what's going on in New Hampshire. What is Families in Transition? What do you all do on a day-to-day basis at your organization? Because I think it'll help folks to know, what does your organization do?
So Families in Transition, right? Our mission is to prevent and break the cycle of homelessness. And we do that in a few different ways, right? We're a not-for-profit and we are located in Manchester and we provide housing services. We have a couple buildings in Concord as well, but to prevent and break the cycle of homelessness, we do it in a few different ways. So we have affordable housing. I think first and foremost, I think we would all agree in our organization that homelessness is an affordable housing issue. So we have 240 units of affordable housing. You know, you just had on Nick Taylor and he talked about housing really eloquently.
So smart.
We have affordable housing, transitional housing, and permanent supportive housing. We have three types of housing. Along with housing, we have shelter. Shelter does not end homelessness. You are still considered homeless when you are sheltered. You're just sheltered.
Mm-hmm. So sheltered, meaning you're at, an individual is at an emergency shelter or is in like a motel, like has received some sort of support in staying at a hotel or motel. Are both of those considered sheltered or is it specifically like at an emergency shelter?
Those are both considered sheltered, as well as transitional housing, which is a form of housing where you stay in that housing for up to 2 years.
Oh, okay.
And then are expected to, you know, with support, with case management, move on into a more permanent housing situation.
Right. Mm-hmm. So when I had students, you know, I worked out in Denver. I was a high school teacher. I had students who were with their parents going from hotel to hotel, bopping into grandma's house, staying, you know, on the couch in the living room for a few days, and then bopping around. That family would be sheltered.
Well, there is a distinction.
Here's the issue. When they're doubled up,
Yes.
they're not sheltered. They're not counted.
Yeah. Oh.
So if you're staying on a friend's couch, if you're staying in a spare bedroom of your parents' home, that is not considered homelessness. Under the HUD definition. So when we're talking about homelessness, we're generally using the terms as defined by the Housing and Urban Development.
Yeah. Okay. This is so helpful. Lauren, I'm sorry to have interrupted you.
No
Please.
worries. Interrupt, right?
This is great. This is really great.
And I talk fast, so tell me to slow
I
down
talk fast too. I'm from New Jersey. We just keep going.
Thank you. We have the adult shelter, which has 138 beds. We have a family shelter, which has 46 beds and 11 units. We also have a food pantry, a substance use program. Our adult shelter is the largest in the state. You know, we're seen as a place that lots of individuals throughout the state come to as a place that they can receive shelter.
Yeah.
And then one of the things that I think for our organization specifically is that being a hand up and not a hand out, and that's through case management services. So we have case management throughout our housing program. It's not easy to move into a housing unit when you are homeless, right? It takes time to get used to being housed. Like our case management team works to keep individuals housed, right? Working with them as buying furniture, how do they function in a home, cleaning their home. It's hard to live in a house when you've been in a shelter or in a place that's uninhabitable for a human being. So you have to learn how to live in a home.
So I like to start every episode with a simple question. Is homelessness actually an issue in New Hampshire?
Yes.
A big one.
Period. Yes, period. A big one indeed. Okay, so tell me more, because I think a lot of folks might assume New Hampshire, big, beautiful, rural, granite state, and might not associate homelessness with the state. So it's an issue, but like how big of an issue? Lauren, you said a big one. How big of an issue is it here in New Hampshire?
I'd say it's big, and it can and likely will become bigger. And it's almost a little bit of a loaded question to answer how big, because there's sort of two different metrics through which we measure homelessness and the rates of homelessness and how many people are homeless.
I have no idea. So, like, how do you know how many folks are homeless in New Hampshire? How does an organization know that?
Yeah, so there's basically two ways that we track homelessness. The first one is called the point in time count, or the PIT count for short. We really love our acronyms in this line of work.
Everyone loves an acronym. Every line of work has their own fancy acronym. I'll go with it. Point in time count. PIT.
Yes, so
got it.
Our PIT count. So the PIT count is something that happens every single year, and it happens across the entire country.
Oh.
In every community of the country.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So you may not know, the country's broken up into these things called continuums of care.
Okay, I thought you were going to say the country was broken up into states. And I was like, Erica, I
Well, it
know
is.
that much. There are 50 of them. Quiz me, Erica. I know.
Yes.
Okay, so it's broken up into continuums of care. That I don't know. So what does that
Yes.
mean?
So another acronym, COCs.
Yes, great.
So basically what a continuum of care is it's both a geographic region, usually drawn along county or municipal lines,
Okay.
but it's also a collaborative collection of human beings and organizations within a community that in some way or form touch homelessness. So that can be providers like us, like Families in Transition, that's providing direct services or housing, but it can also be healthcare providers, it can be faith-based organizations, government agencies, or even just concerned citizens. It really can be anyone that makes up this continuum, wraparound continuum of care. I'd say there's about 400 in the country. Each state has varying amounts of COCs. New Hampshire has 3.
Oh,
We have Manchester COC, which is our city where FIT is located. We have the Nashua COC, which is sort of the southern bit of New Hampshire. And then we have the balance of state, which is everything else.
Everything else.
Manchester, Nashua, everybody else.
Everything
Okay,
else from
all right.
Portsmouth to North Country is balance
wow,
of state. But
okay.
I bring up those 3 COCs because it's through those COCs that we are tracking and counting homelessness. Kind of returning to the PIT count, every year across the country, every COC, which effectively covers the entire geography of the United States, has a count, both a sheltered count and an unsheltered count of people who are experiencing homelessness. It happens every year on the same time, on January 22nd, and it usually happens at night, somewhere between midnight and about 6 a.m., because we are trying to count both people who are sheltered in an emergency shelter, transitional housing, a safe haven. And we're also trying to count the unsheltered. So those are people who are outside in the street, who may be in their car, who may be in a place unfit for habitability. And so we are sending basically volunteer teams out in the middle of that night to either observe people who are homeless and writing that down, or ideally we're speaking to these people and we are getting their information, getting demographic information, and that's how we count homelessness in the country. So
the same day, like across the country, it is the same, and it's in the winter, which for us in the northern part of the country, like, is extremely significant. On January 22nd, it probably feels very different than Miami, January 22nd. I'm making assumptions based on the geography of our country, but it's probably a different experience to be outside, unsheltered in New Hampshire versus in Florida. That's really interesting.
You kind of hit the nail on the head with one of the potential issues with using the pit count is, particularly in states like ours where it's very cold, people in the coldest months of the year tend to hide themselves away or find places that are warmer to go, that if you have a team of volunteers that's kind of walking in a grid pattern around the street, we may not see everyone and they may not be counted. And so that's, therein lies the question, are we even getting an accurate picture of how many people are homeless? So we use a second metric as well with the pit count. And so we use the Homeless Management Information System, or HMIS.
I'm going to keep track of all these. These are all going to make it.
We'll have to make a little cheat sheet later.
That's right.
So every COC uses an HMIS, a management system, and at any point of contact, so if someone's accessing a shelter or services or housing from homelessness, they will be entered with their consent into this database, this HMIS. And it's through that database that we're able to track over the course of a year or longer someone's experience or sort of journey through the system. And so in some ways the HMIS data is a bit more accurate because it's looking at an entire year as opposed to a single data point on the coldest night of the year.
Right. And so organizations like yours would then put that information in at any point in the year if someone has come in and you're aware that they are experiencing homelessness. That would be part of that sort of longer term annual review on top of and in addition to the January 22nd count.
Yes, and I would note that this is a required thing that people have to do for certain types of funding. However, not every agency that's serving homelessness enters data into the system. So even the HMIS system can be flawed. So kind of returning to your original question, how big is the issue of homelessness? The truth is it's hard to tell, but using the data points that we do have, we say that it's big because in 2023, we had a 52% increase in homelessness.
In New Hampshire alone?
In New Hampshire alone.
Wow.
We were first in the nation. Number one for the highest rate increase in homelessness.
Really?
In 2023.
Wow. Why? Why did that happen? That's probably an even more complex question, but that's my immediate question is like, why did it increase so much?
So it's a combination of things. There's a lot of different things that go into homelessness. And to be fair, for the record, it did decrease by 8% in 2024.
Mm-hmm. But that was still a big jump in 2023. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, we went from 1,474 people in 2022 to 2,441 people in 2023.
Holy smokes.
According to the pit count.
Yeah.
And then if you go to the HMIS count, it's over 6,000 people. According to HMIS, we have 6,806 unhoused individuals, which is higher than the population of 80% of New Hampshire communities.
Holy smokes. That is, okay, so when I asked you how big of an issue and you said big.
That's what we mean.
Really, really big issue. Holy smokes. What leads to folks becoming homeless? How does that happen? And I'll just give a quick caveat to say, I said this to Nick too, and he made fun of me a little bit, but I'm on our town's budget recommendations committee, right? And the subcommittee that I'm on is one of them is the welfare office. And I have learned so much about how our town supports folks to make sure that they can stay in their homes because if they lose their homes for whatever reason and have to go to a shelter or have to go to a hotel, like that adds so many more complexities to them being able to get back into housing. So like there are offices in our towns that are there to support folks as well, in addition to organizations. So it has been really eye-opening to hear about those types of stories of folks trying to keep them in their homes and support them there, because so many challenges occur once that housing is gone or lost for whatever reason. So that is a long way for me to ask a question. What leads to someone being homeless in New Hampshire, being unhoused?
So we have a simple answer, and then we have a more complicated answer.
Ooh, let's just say simple and just cut it. No.
So the short answer is that homelessness results from a lack of affordable housing.
Yeah.
And
boy, are we lacking it in New Hampshire. If I've learned
Yes.
anything on that episode with Nick, we really do not have any. We don't have very much, I should say.
yeah, 0.6% vacancy rate. Yeah, it's very,
wild.
very
Yeah.
small.
Eric and I both have so many stories, right, that we have heard. I hear a lot lately about elderly folks. They've been married their whole life. One spouse takes care of everything. The other spouse kind of is not really sure about their financial situation, and one spouse passes away, and then they have no idea, right? Or they've been evicted from their apartment, which we hear more about lately, about developers are selling and buying apartments, and then they're out of rent. Rent can't go up $2,000, $1,000. They can't swing that a month.
Yeah.
Eric, I know you have a plethora of stories too.
Yeah, and I'll just add, when we're talking about the aging or elderly population, generally what we mean is people who are 65 and older, and that's definitely the most rapidly increasing population in homelessness. About 1 in 5 people who experience homelessness are in that 65 and up category, and it's only increasing, especially in a state where we have some of the oldest people in the country.
Yeah. 1 in 5?
Yes.
That's just, you're just talking about New Hampshire. You're not talking about the whole country. Just here.
So that's actually for the whole country.
Oh, that's the whole country.
1 in 5, yeah. But it's this.
But
we're
still,
seeing the same
still
trend.
shocking. Yeah.
It's closer to 1 in 4 in New Hampshire.
Yeah.
Okay, so worse is what you're saying, Eric.
Are over 65, yes.
Whoa.
So Liz, if you came for a tour of our adult shelter, we talk about it often, is that the population of our adult shelter is aging, right? And a couple of years ago, it was 45 was the average age. Now it's 47. I mean, that doesn't seem like a big jump, but that's significant when you walk through the adult shelter and you see people who are elderly there. They're living out their later years in life at the adult shelter, and that's not a place for them to be.
My mind is boggled right now. Yes, we are an aging state. And of course, logically, I guess, like if we are an aging state, then therefore also the folks who are experiencing homelessness are also of an aging demographic. But I'm just going to be honest, it hadn't occurred to me. Like, that's really, really wild.
Yeah, and I think part of it is, people who are older tend to be on a more fixed income.
Yeah.
As the rental rates are increasing year over year, but the amount that they're getting on a fixed income is not keeping pace with that. We're seeing more and more elderly folks winding up in homelessness or in kind of unstable housing situations. We also see that, as families are struggling more now with, their finances or being able to keep themselves stable, it's more difficult for them to maybe take in an elderly parent or sibling or something like that. And so that's also a piece of it that, as everyone's sort of tightening the belts, so to speak, it becomes more difficult to provide that elder care for family members.
People fleeing domestic violence, right? We have some families in our programs in that situation. Medical bills, right? We have people who work in our shelters. They're working. They're waking up, they're going to work, but they have medical bills. Life is expensive, and there's no affordable housing.
So there's like the question of like, how does someone become homeless, which is lack of affordable housing?
And I'd say lack of affordable housing paired with a lack of social support systems. So you can't really have one without the other. It doesn't suffice to simply put someone into a home and then say, great, you're no longer homeless.
High five. Here's your key. Off you go.
I think that's where the idea of, how do we as a community create that safety net or that support system to really keep people housed. So it's really like a 2-part system of we need more housing, but we also need to make sure that we're putting in the supports in place to help people maintain that housing. And I mean, I think, again, talking about the elderly or talking about, someone who may need like healthcare or who's working, like we are seeing cuts to Medicaid, for example. And so when you're losing that support, if you're cutting Medicaid and there's 46,000 Granite Staters who are going to be affected by this big Medicaid cut from the big, beautiful bill.
Yeah.
But there's a trickle-down effect, right, of that.
Not the trickle-down effect they want to happen from this bill,
No.
but the trickle-down of negative impacts on everyday folks. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think that's an example of a social support system that's being cut or defunded, and then taking that away doesn't help people maintain housing.
Right.
And that's why we need supports like childcare, employment help, veterans affairs. If someone's a veteran, that is actually the one thing that we do right in New Hampshire, is helping our homeless veterans.
Okay.
Another first in the nation.
Yeah. Okay.
We are actually in that same 2023 report where we were 52% up in our homelessness rate.
Yeah.
We actually were the best of any state in reducing the rate of homelessness in veterans specifically.
Wow. Mm-hmm. Okay, we'll take that stat. That's a positive stat. That's good to hear.
And it's because we put funding into it. We put a lot more funding into it.
Well. Have we hit maybe a thing that could solve some of these issues is maybe funding. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I'd also say there's more of a, how do I put it? There's more of a social acceptance for veterans and then wanting to help veterans who are experiencing homelessness, as opposed to some of the other demographics that we see. We talked about elderly, but, another big demographic that we're seeing rising is children, so youth 25 and under. There's a very large increase in youth homelessness, and particularly in the LGBTQ community. They're very overrepresented in the homelessness population. About 40% of youth who are homeless identify as LGBTQ+. That is a national statistic, but we're seeing very similar parallels in the New Hampshire data as well.
And some of that, I imagine, is likely because they have been rejected from their homes by family members or whomever, and now are outside of the home that they have been in for so long. That's really horrifying.
It's horrifying, it's terrible, and I think that it's also a good point of comparison where you see, a child may identify one way or another, may not be getting the same kind of supports as maybe a veteran, as far as like funding or the social supports that are available to them.
Yeah, that's scary. It's scary to think about that some folks, at least in how actions happen, how funding goes out, to think that some folks who are homeless are maybe higher priorities, higher targets for supporting them versus others. That's it's a lot to process there.
I think it's partly built into the common misconceptions about homelessness and what do people think of when they think of someone who's experiencing homelessness. And it's not always just, the middle-aged man on the street corner. It's your grandmother, it's a child, it's a mother.
Yeah, what are the misconceptions? Because I think that's a really good one to dig into. What have you found when you talk to folks?
I mean, I think that what we see all the time is what Erica just said. Like, everyone thinks it's a middle-aged man on the corner, right, panhandling, asking for money, someone who is scary or dirty. When we provide tours of our programming, I would say that's not how people feel at all, right? Everyone in the shelter, we have an adult shelter, right? Men, women. It's not scary to be in there, right? They're in a very vulnerable situation. It's not where they want to be. Our family shelter is families, 11 families, moms, dads, grandparents, kids, right? I think everyone thinks it's that image in your head of that person, of that unclean person. That's not what we see for homelessness. We're seeing a lot of people, like people who are working, who are one paycheck away, right? A lot of Americans are one paycheck away from being homeless, right? They're families, they're individuals, but with the price of life and housing.
Housing,
right?
groceries,
Sometimes it's impossible.
transportation. Like, this is not a state that is really walkable. There's not a
Daycare.
lot of places you can walk to. Yep, childcare. All of those things are expensive. Yeah.
The main misconception, I think, is that just it's not what you see in the media. It's not what you immediately think of. I think another misconception I would add is that it's not easy to get housing. I think that there's sometimes this idea of like, why don't you just get an apartment? Why don't you just get a job? Why don't you just... And there's so many barriers, even if you've accessed the right resources, even if you have help, that can prevent you from actually getting to that point of being housed. So there's eligibility requirements. So there may be certain units or certain apartment buildings that you qualify for or don't based on your family size, based on your income, sometimes based on like disability or discrimination. And so it all compounds that, like, even if you're at that precipice of being housed, you can still be hit with a wall or a barrier that's preventing you from getting those keys. So I think that that's another misconception, that it's not, though I wish it were, it's not as simple even as just getting a house or finding an apartment. There's a lot of steps that lead up to getting into that home. And I think that that's, again, where that case management support network, those social services really play a big role, is helping guide people through those often very complicated barriers.
Erica, I think that's a really good point, because when we have a unit that opens up, the next person on the list just can't move in. The units are specific to
funding types, to contracts on the building. It's not as simple as we have a vacancy, let's put someone right in.
And I don't have the number off the top of my head, Erica. Do you know what our wait list is for our housing?
The last time I checked, which was a couple weeks ago, it was sitting around like 400 people
on our wait list for our housing.
We get about 100 calls a week. Into our intake department of people looking for housing. And at our family shelter, it's about 25 families right now who are on the wait list.
And those are families that are in uninhabitable locations, right?
They're living in their car. They're living in an abandoned building. They're living on the side of the road.
Yeah. Our intake coordinator spends about 45 minutes on the phone to make sure to work on diversion and prevention measures, which could lead to they could be doubled up. Like, that's a better place for them to be with a friend or a family member.
When we have a point of contact, we always try to do that prevention and diversion work, because prevention and diversion is actually the best way to combat homelessness. If someone does not fall into that homelessness cycle in the first place, that's really, that's the part of our mission, the preventing the cycle in the first place, that prevention diversion. But if that's not successful, we do an assessment through coordinated entry to sort of figure out how vulnerable someone is. There's sort of a scoring component using a lot of different factors. Do you have children? Are you fleeing an imminent dangerous situation, potentially domestic violence, to assess, who's the most vulnerable. And that's how the wait list is determined. So we're trying to pull the people who are most in immediate need first to get them into housing across our continuum of care, and sometimes statewide. So our continuums of care organize and work together. So if someone comes into Manchester and a different continuum of care has a spot available for them, we try to coordinate when we can. If the person's up to moving somewhere else, we're constantly talking, because we're trying not to stay in our little silo of this is just Manchester, this is just a Nashua problem. It's really a statewide problem, and we're really working to figure out what can we do as a state, as the wider community to address this and to help each other.
How many shelters and beds are available across the state?
So it's a complicated question.
Okay, I didn't think that one was so complicated. So that's interesting to hear that that's a complicated question. Yeah.
Unfortunately, I can't give you just an easy number, because there's no centralized list or resource that tells you where all the shelters are in the state.
On purpose?
You think there would be, there's not. And I can explain why. It's because shelters come in all forms and sizes. And so when we're talking about shelter, what are we talking about? Because you have emergency shelters, like the ones that Families in Transition runs, where there's sort of like your typical vision of a shelter. But we also have smaller shelters that may still be emergency shelter, but may not be serving 138 individuals. You have a lot of faith-based organizations doing this work. smaller nonprofits where they're definitely doing emergency sheltering, but they may be housing one family, two people. They have, it may be a church with a spare bedroom in the back. They may not be entering into that homeless management information system.
Right.
So we're not tracking it. We don't know the work that's happening. You also have like domestic violence shelters, certain youth shelters, which operate with discretion and tend to be a bit more secretive intentionally about what they're doing.
Yep.
And then you have things like winter warming shelters, which are temporary crop-up shelters specifically for the wintertime to keep people warm so that they do not freeze to death.
Yeah.
So all of those things are considered shelters, but it can be difficult to give a number because, how many winter warming shelters are going to crop up this winter? How many churches or synagogues or mosques are providing shelter for people but aren't necessarily reporting it to these bigger databases?
Right.
But I think it's important to note that we can say, right, that we do know that 13 shelters are funded by the state grant and aid funding through the state of New Hampshire. I'm sorry, through DHHS each year.
Mm-hmm. Department of Health and Human Services in New Hampshire. Yep.
Oh, I'm sorry. That was
I love
Department of Health and Human Services.
It's like I'm being quizzed. I'm like, okay, I know that one. Department of Health and Human Services. Okay, so there's 13 that receive funding through DHHS.
Yeah, so the state does provide funding for emergency shelters. This past year, actually, Senator Birdsell, shout out to her that she pushed through level funding for emergency shelters.
Was that part of the state budget? Or
It's part
was
of
that
the
a
state
separate
budget.
Okay, yep.
So 2023, we received $8 per bed per day for sheltering. In 2024, we got $20 per bed per day, so there was an increase. And then there was also an emergency funding bill that went through that provided an extra $7.32. So as of 2024, we were receiving $27 roughly per bed per day that we were providing. And then through this most recent budget cycle, the funding is coming through, and again at $27 per bed per day.
Okay.
To put that into perspective, for families in transition, it costs about $45 per bed per day to operate the shelter.
Yep.
Though we have, partners who say our operating cost is closer to $75 per bed per day or $100 per bed per day. In any case, the funding we're definitely grateful for, but it's not enough to rely solely on that one source of state funding.
Right.
But there are 13 shelters across the state that are receiving that funding, but there are definitely many, many more shelters that are doing the work but are not able to rely on the state for that work.
Maybe this is a bias or an assumption that I am making, but I feel like a lot of folks, when they think about homelessness, they might think about tents or encampments or things like that, and then feel that homelessness is not an issue in their community if that isn't happening. And so if somebody comes through and clears out tents, it's like, oh, thank goodness. Now the problem is solved. And I think that just means those folks are no longer physically, visibly present. That hasn't solved actually anything. But what happens when folks are cleared out of a space like that?
They're cleared out from the space.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head that when an encampment is moved or people are cleared out, it's not solving homelessness, it's merely making it less visible. That's one of again, maybe a misconception about homelessness that, if we're not seeing it, it's not happening.
It's not here. Like, if I don't see it in my town, then we don't have homeless folks in my town. That's just
and
not true.
I think it's something that you often see when comparing cities versus rural spaces. We think, homelessness is worse in cities. And I mean, there's some truth to that. Like, the data shows there tend to be,
there's more people. It's like by density, there's just more people.
But it's also because there's more resources in cities, and because rural homelessness often looks a bit different. It's someone staying in a shed. It's someone staying deep in the woods. And again, if you're doing something like the pit count, where you're just trying to make a grid of volunteers, I mean, there's no way to actually account for how many people are up in the North Country. Who knows where? The issue of clearing out encampments does not solve homelessness, and actually it's just making it harder to see. And also what it does is, if you're pushing people out, whether it's with strict ordinances or fines or things like that, people are becoming more transient. They're instead of staying in one place for a long time, they're moving every few days. They're moving in the middle of the night. They're having to find different places to go so that they're not swept up. And one of the consequences of that is, that outreach workers have a more difficult time of reconnecting with folks that they're building a relationship with.
Right.
So, you may have planned to meet up with Joe to help him get employment, help him get a phone, help him get medication, whatever it may be that he needs. And you make a plan, hey, we'll meet back here tomorrow. But if Joe has to move in the middle of the night or his tent's swept up, you may not be able to find him again, or it may be a long time before you are. And so we're losing connections with people that we're trying to help because of ordinances like that.
What are the answers? Like, what can happen? What can cities and towns do? What can the state do? I heard you give a shout out to Senator Birdsell for making sure that the funding was the same from before, and that it's still not enough, but that there's something to that of it at least being the same, especially with this recent state budget where a lot of services were cut. What's the answer, Erica and Lauren? Tell me what needs to happen.
I think it's a few different things.
Yep.
I think the first piece is talking about, what can we do at a city level, and then what can we do at a state or even potentially a federal level.
Yeah.
City levels, I think it's about getting more involved with your community. I think in a city or town setting, you have the ability to create more impact. That may be joining a zoning board.
We're back to zoning boards,
Back to
baby.
zoning,
You all thought it was over, listener, but we are so back.
Cannot escape it.
Can't get away from it. But it's true, right? Like that
It's
sort
true.
of local level to better
Yep.
understand, what are we dealing with here with being able to have housing in our community? Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to a General Assembly meeting for your continuum of care. Every continuum of care, usually every month or every other month, is having community-wide meetings. You can find them on the Community of Care websites. Go to one. It's very enlightening. We have people who are experiencing homelessness. We have agencies providing services. We have firefighters. We have policemen. We have everyone who's involved in some way with these services showing up to these General Assembly meetings and talking about what can we do. I think at a state level, it's a little bit different because I think a lot of the onus of addressing homelessness statutorily falls on cities and towns.
Yeah.
Yeah, they do.
The RSA 165.1 requires that cities and towns take the brunt of addressing homelessness and just poverty in general. We're required to support our poor and help people maintain housing at a city level. But state level, one of the things that is talked a lot about in our circles that we would love to see in the near future is medical respite.
What does that mean?
Medical respite is effectively a stepping stone between a hospital stay and returning to homelessness. So if you are someone who's experiencing homelessness or you don't necessarily have a place to go, and you go to the hospital, as everyone at some point in their lives will probably do.
Yep.
Hospitals cannot legally discharge you back to the street. So oftentimes what's happening is hospitals are discharging people to shelters, or they're discharging them back to the street and just kind of not reporting it. So what happens with that is typically you would have some kind of program called medical respite where it's a place to send people so that they can recover. So if we're sending people to shelters directly after hospitalization, you're potentially putting them into a crowded congregate living space.
Right.
You're potentially putting them into a place where there's bunk beds. And if you just got a knee surgery, how are you getting to the top bunk bed? That kind of thing. And the shelter staff may not be prepared to address the specific needs of your your
the
health
healthcare follow-up
Yes.
that might be needed for someone for all sorts of issues that led you to a hospital in the first place, right?
Right. So you may not have that. And alternatively, if the hospital says, we're not going to send you back to a shelter, we're not going to put you on the street, then that means we're keeping you in this hospital bed, which then translates to you are accruing more medical expenses that you maybe can't pay for. And we're also kind of holding a bed that someone who may now have an emergency can't use. So it's really kind of something that affects everyone. It's not just a homelessness issue. It's not just a hospital issue. It's a, again, community-wide issue.
Yeah.
And every other state in New England has a medical respite program. New Hampshire's the only one that does not.
One of my least favorite start of a sentence or end of a sentence is, New Hampshire is the only state that does not.
If someone's coming out of the hospital, potentially going into homelessness from the hospital, like they are having one of the worst moments of their life.
Yeah.
And it's important to note that, like, once you're in the medical respite, not only are you receiving the medical care from qualified professionals, but typically that's another point of contact where you can have things like case management or supportive services that are helping you line up a place to go once you're released. So that it's not just we're in medical respite and then we wind up in homelessness. It's not a delay. It's actually giving you that time to set something up while you're able to recover outside of the hospital.
A stepping stone, which I think you said earlier, like the idea of it's a transition that leads into housing, leads into safety and a place to be long term. Wowie wow. We're the only state in New England. Okay.
It is something that a lot of providers in our field have been vocal about, have advocated for. It is not something that's come to fruition.
Okay.
And I think that sort of leads into another sort of final suggestion of like what can you do at a city or state level or even a federal level is vote. Please vote.
Hi, everyone.
That's a great idea.
Voting is a great thing. It's great for you and me, for folks to vote. Yep.
Vote and call your representatives.
Right.
The National Alliance to End Homelessness actually has a lot of good resources on their website. They have resources that you can take templates where you can just send your concerns to your senators, to your representatives.
Those are all excellent next steps for people. You have given us homework. You've given me homework, Lauren and Erica, both of you. We can do better in New Hampshire, it sounds like. Mm-hmm. You guys are great. It's incredible. You're doing incredible work. Thank you for all the things that you're doing.
I think you're doing great work, too. I mean, just providing a platform where, we or other people can come and talk about these things that we're seeing, that we're deeply entrenched in our line of work, that people just understand what's happening in their community.
Yeah. Thank you for helping inform me and probably other people as well who listen. So thank you both very much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Liz.
Thank you.
This was fun. I feel good.
Yeah, I think it's great.
Amazing. I might need to have you both back on because we might need to do a follow-up.
We will happily jump on.
We'll love a follow-up.
This is horrifying. I'm horrified.